This is number 9 in the New Moon series. I have Tara on the screen. Um, we have two wonderful storytellers with us tonight, and some people waiting in the trees, I understand. There are people who tell stories all the time, and some tell stories only once in a blue moon, and we have one of those with us tonight. I'm glad about that. And my guests are both friends and neighbors. Oops, I'm trying to click at the same time here. And I think I'm equidistant between them. On the one hand, we have from Tarbet Vale, Marcel Lavoie. Marcel is a long time. You originated the Wreck Cove General Store, did you not?
I did with Mike
Many
Prim.
many years ago, yes. And
Yeah,
Marcel is only also the only actual character in a book called The Promised Land, a novel of Cape Breton. The author made an offer at an auction if the high bidder would get written into the book, and Marcel was the buyer, and the author complied, and there she is.
that's a
And
cheap trick, eh?
yeah, it was. She was a bit surprised that the author used her real name, but well, as my friend says, c'est la vie en soupe de jour. And my other guest is Gordon Kennedy from just down the road here, and I can tell when Gordon's working because I can hear banging on metal. Gordon is a metal sculptor, also deals with paints and other things. Do you not it from time to time?
Yep.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
a back porch philosopher of great import. We have had some conversations, and it's lovely to spend time listening to Gordon and his philosophy. And there we are. Oh, there was one thing I wanted to do before we got too far in here, and that was this. Ah, these are some of Gordon's sculptures from his store called Iron Art and Photographs here in right here in downtown Tarbet.
Industrial heartland.
Yes. Well, we had a little discussion on Friday, and we decided. I think Gordon decided that Marcel would go first. Marcel, would you like to tell us the story, my dear?
I will tell you a short story, and it's a fishing related story, which I think is fitting because our community is getting ready and it's a hustle and bustle at the wharf, I presume, which I haven't been to, but it's lobster fishing around the corner. And this is a story that happened on the water, which was relayed to me when I was a storekeeper. And it happened. So there was a captain in one of the boats that had passed away and had passed on his license to his son. And his son was now the current captain on the boat. And one fine day, something happened out on the water, and this new young captain had done something that didn't sit well with the others on the other boats, and I don't know exactly at where this happened. The exchange happened on the water, but as the boat of the said new young captain came in voice proximity to another boat, one of the helpers on the other boat, well, it was this outrage happening because whatever the story had been, and he yelled across the water to the offending captain, and he yelled with this booming voice, and he said, "If your father was alive today, he would be rolling in his grave." And well, that's the story, but to me that is endlessly funny. It's anyway, that was the measure of how horrible it was, unethical, whatever the person had done. So that's the end of that story. But
Yeah.
it's the local humor of exchanges that happen in the everyday.
Yeah, that would be Little River Wharf, would it?
That would have been Little River
Yeah. And,
fishing out
and
of
ethics would be very important there. That I when I heard that the fishermen, in order to help preserve the stocks, cut their traps back from 275 to 250. They voluntarily
Mhm.
cut back the number of traps they fished to help preserve the stock, and that's pretty darn ethical. I was glad to hear that.
Yeah,
Good
and
dear.
they have, there are, I think grounds are generally everywhere around the Maritimes are open to everyone. And on the North Shore, this could be the only place where the old custom of fishing off of your land, you get the waters that come off of your lands, and they still go by that rule. And because it's so well enforced and maintained amongst each other, that the fisheries just let that be. And I find that quite impressive.
Yes. Good. Community getting along with itself.
Mhm.
Gordon, you spent some time on the boats, didn't you, when you first came
I
here?
did. Yes, I did. But that was back in the day, you know, it was wooden boats and iron men. Now it's sort of Tupperware boats, and I can't speak for the crews, but it was a lot of fun. I liked the sunrise on the water, that sort of thing. But what was interesting was every year before fishing would start, you'd be standing there, you know, and the fishermen get around. Oh, the fishing will be no good this year. Too much ice. And say, okay. Next year you're standing. Oh, the fishing will be no good this year. Not enough ice. And it went on and on. The water's too warm. It's not warm enough. That's a book for you, Ron. Fishing excuses. I thought of it, writing them down. And these guys with their brogues and everything, it was hilarious. Well, I'd be standing there at 3:30, 4 a.m. in the morning, half asleep, and listening to discussing the fishing and how it was going. And it was a lot of the best thing, of course, was the sunrise and the paycheck, but there was a lot of good guys there, and the community made much more sense. I moved here from away, and there's all these little houses dotted along the coast, and I always was kind of curious how it worked. And then I got a job with Don McCaskill and Jeff Brownstein Fishing, and then it all made sense, because in those days all the boats were at the harbor in Little River, so you would all meet. Well, you would, and not intentionally, but they'd all be working on their boats at the same time, and you'd help them push them into the water, and they'd catch up after the winter, and all the stories would be flying around. And then the community was very active, and it made sense. How the place could be. Because for me, it was like, okay, a lot of hills, beautiful, a lot of water, but a lot of houses, but I don't see, there was no connection with how any money would have been made. Not that I made any, but some did well. So it was good. It was good. Fishing's good for the place. If you take that away, I don't know, have to be storytelling. And how's that pay, Bill?
It pays as well as some other pursuits like survival farming, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm in it for the glory and recognition. It's certainly not for the money. I have a new definition of optimist, and that's someone who goes into writing for the revenue.
Well, that's what they said with the farmer, wasn't it? When he won the lottery, they said, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to farm till the money runs out."
I heard that when I was trucking. I heard a guy on the road, two of them talking on the radio, said, "If I ever won the lottery, by God, I'd get me a brand new truck and I'd run it till I was broke again."
Yeah, well, I don't think I'd do that.
I think the attitude that you were talking about with the fishermen goes beyond just the water, because the same thing happens on the prairies. Spring comes, oh, it's too dry, it's too wet, it's too early, it's too late, and you are up around Rosetown. That's where the rich farmers are, right? Yeah, and the rich farmers in Rosetown say, down around Broadview, that's where they make all the money down there.
Oh, yeah.
Just, I don't know, maybe a fear of success or.
Well, superstition too, like I grew up on the West Coast and the fishermen there, like if you opened a can upside down, you threw it overboard. That was it. You didn't keep it on the boat because it was bad luck.
Uh-huh.
And that seems easy here, but they were out a hell of a long ways in their little 36, 40-foot boats. So, you would have a lot of things to think about, especially if the weather turned bad. So, but they were generally a superstitious bunch. Same stock. They were the same stock as here. Came from the same places. A lot of relatives back and forth there.
Yep. Well, the mountains are higher, but the people are about the same size, no matter where you go, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I came from southern Manitoba in farming. My dad had a store in the farming communities, and the community was like here. It's all the farmers make up the community. And it was, when I moved here, I felt completely at home, and I understood after I was here for a while, because I found that the fishermen and the farmers were the same. They were one of the same. They had this, they lived by the weather and the climate, I guess, the weather, and that gauged how they, how the crops were, and hear the wind. And it was the same with the prairies, and it's all the same people. If you put the people who live off the land, whether it's the land or the sea.
Yeah, people seem to be the same. Well, I got one story, and that's from my background out in the West Coast. Like I'm a come from away, and if I was from any farther, I'd be on my way back to here. So, but this place, it was interesting. It was a mental institute actually called Esendale, and it was the biggest one in the West Coast. It covered acres, and they had bakeries, and they had everything from seriously dangerous people to people who just, couldn't deal with the things. And they had this long stone wall that went, hundreds and hundreds of feet, and yards really. And it was by this highway that we used to take. And one day I was driving along there in one of my cars that was long past the best before date, and it had like 4 Maypop tires on it. So I'm zipping along. It's a beautiful afternoon. Everything's fine. And then suddenly I get the flat tire, of course. And it was a big old wreck. So I pulled off as best I could. And it was on the driver's side. So the tire side was on the road. So I'm there, and I was like, okay, I can do this. So I do it all right. I jack up the car. I take the wheel nuts off, and I put them in the hubcap thingy. And I put it behind me so that I won't lose them. And then I get up and go to the other side of the car to get this is my agent. I'm probably not allowed to do this story. No, it's okay. So I go to the other side of the car, and while I'm over there, this jackass hits the hubcap with all the wheel nuts, and they go flying into the swamp on the other side of the road. And it's like, so I'm standing there, kind of like, what? And I hear this voice on the other side of the fence there, I said, excuse me. So I'm about to get really angry and act foolish. So I said, oh yeah, okay, yeah. And the guy says, listen, you got 3 other tires there. Why don't you take a wheel nut off of each one of those, put your wheel on, and go to the gas station? And I was looking at the guy, and I guess he picked up that he said, listen, we're just crazy here. We're not stupid. And that's my story from there.
Good one. Yes, my goodness. I have a short one that I heard from my father, and I'm not sure if he was talking about his father or his grandfather. It was one of the ancestors anyway. We'll call him Gramps. And Gramps lived in the ancestral home in Brockville, Ontario. He lived at the corner of Pine Street and Bethune. And Bethune was an east-west street and Pine was north. Gramps was coming home from work one day along James Street, which is one north of Bethune, walking east, and he came to the corner where he'd normally turn right onto Pine Street and go home. And the city had been busy that day, and they changed Pine Street from a two-way street to a one-way northbound. So he said, continued on another block to Park Road, went down a block and turned back onto Bethune, went another block, and he was home. And that's the whole story. And the only thing that makes it interesting is that Gramps wasn't driving, he was on foot. And he didn't go down the one-way street the wrong way. It's one of those moments afterwards. Tara has been operating things here in all 9 of our New Moon stories, and it's wonderful. And I've invited her to tell stories before, and she said, well, I only do it once on a blue moon.
Yeah.
It's the blue moon now.
Put me off, yes. So I looked around and I said, the next blue moon, Tara, is in August. And she said, oh, you remembered that?
Yeah.
Yes, I remember. She said, okay, I'll tell my blue moon story next time. So
That's
Tara
right.
McNeil from
Hello.
Cape Breton Library.
All right. Well, thank you, Bill. I knew you'd remember that I'm a blue moon storyteller, and I have just a short little story to share. And I was thinking about this when Shirley and Barbara were telling stories at the last session. They both shared kind of childhood memories and family memories, and Barbara had talked about people having to leave Cape Breton or not. And then she shared about how her dad, just to say he drove off the island, they did a little drive just off the causeway and then turned around and came back. And that was the only time he was ever off the island. And I thought, oh my heavens, that's great. And it made me think about so my grandfather's family, they were Mackenzies, and they grew up in Christmas Island, which is in the middle of Cape Breton. And he had 7 brothers and sisters, and he was the only one who stayed in Cape Breton. So the other 7, they went to Windsor, they went to Detroit, they went to Boston. One went to Antigonish, so he didn't go terribly far, but that's just how life went. There was only going to be one person who could make a living on the farm. Everyone else had to find their way. And this story is about one of those great aunts. So she was one of the older siblings, and she moved to Boston. And she came back and asked her brother, as she was getting a little bit older, could she build a cabin on the property, so on the family property, because she'd like to come back to Cape Breton every summer. And he said, that's no problem. It was never an issue. And they built this cute little bungalow down by the Brador. And that's where my memories of her come in. So I remember walking to the beach and passing this bungalow, and she'd always have cookies, and she'd always have visitors, and really lovely, lovely lady. And what I imagine her routine was when she was visiting Cape Breton from Boston in the summers, I think her days, they played a lot of cards at this house, a lot of cards. They did church, they went visiting. So they always went to neighbors or had visitors over. And occasionally they do little shopping trips. So go into Sydney for shopping or go to Bedeque. And that's where this story takes us. She had a few of her friends, and she said, let's go to Bedeque. Let's do a little day shopping in Bedeque. For those of you who don't know, Bedeque's a cute little town not far from where Bill's at, and it's quite busy in the summertime. It has a lot of little shops and ice cream parlors and bakeries. And so my great aunt organizes this little expedition over to Bedeque, and they're senior citizens at this time, and innocent and fun, and they hop in their car and they drive over, and the day is glorious. And I think their routine was to kind of park at the bottom of the main street and just sort of mosey up the street and hit this shop and hit that shop, and at some point get some tea. And they'd maybe been at it for about an hour or something, and she says one of the friends spied a house a shop that had a lot of nice decals in the window, a lot of really beautiful stained glass. And she said, let's go to that shop next. I'd really like to get a little stained glass piece for my window in the kitchen. And so they're all okay with it, and that's their next stop. They pile into this shop, and the friend who suggested it goes right to the window, and she's picking off the pieces off the window, and she's like looking for a price tag and trying to find that perfect piece. And someone else is, you know, at another little table just trying to find out what's for sale. And my aunt looks around and says, this is a really cozy shop. And then she looks at a TV and she sees a remote by the couch. And just as it's kind of dawning on her, a man in his slippers and his house coat walks into the room and asks, can I help you ladies? And the friend who went to the window was mortified. She was so embarrassed, but I can picture my aunt would not, she would have burst open with laughter. She would have found that scene so hilarious, and she would have been very embarrassed, but she also would have found it so funny, like a big laugh. And of course she would have apologized and then laughed for a few minutes and then apologized more. Anyway, I guess not that you need a moral at the end of the story, but if you live on Main Street, don't decorate your front window too much. I just want those tourist cars coming in. Anyway, that's my little story. Thanks, Sally. Yeah.
Well, good. Thank you. Worth waiting for.
Yeah.
Well done and well told. Thanks very much. We sent out invitations to all the people who have guested on this program before. We've had 18 guests lined up, and 17 of them showed, and one's in bad books. And for any of those or anyone else who's on the side there, if you'd like to drop in with a story, you just hit the chat button and tell Tara, because we're happy to have you tonight. And we have no time limit. The bathroom's not far and I got good tea, so we can stay here till midnight if you like. Any nibbles?
No nibbles.
Not yet.
Not yet. But I should say someone did share that they know the place that Gordon was talking about. They had a brother-in-law in that institution. So Judy shared that. Yeah. So that was.
Yeah, I wasn't making it up.
No.
This
Or
time.
not all of it anyways. True as I'm sitting here, eh, Ron?
True as I'm sitting here. Yeah. Tommy Peggy. Oh, there's a note from Art. Oh, they've got, okay.
Oh, they have a
I
story.
see,
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Why don't you light up Art Spencer then? He's always fun.
Sure. And I think they're having problems with their.
Actually, it's my better half.
Where to go?
Yeah, we moved to Myra, so we are at the mercy of the Myra internet, which comes and goes. So we don't. Now I'm going to have to go back and watch it so we catch the end of these stories. But I was laughing when Gordon was telling the story about, the people helping him because they might have had emotional problems, but they weren't stupid. My sister was a dog groomer years and years ago. Okay, and she had her dog grooming place was in my mother's basement. And anyway, one day they had this dog and they put the dog in a cage, okay, to wait for its grooming. And in the my sister had an employee. They used to give incentives to hire people who were intellectually disabled or socially disabled. So she had a teenager who was intellectually disabled that loved animals. So she came and my sister paid her a pittance, but the government subsidized it so she would have income. So anyway, my sister had this big dog came in and they put the dog in the cage waiting for the dog to be groomed. And anyway, when they went to get the dog out of the cage, that dog snarled, it offered to bite, and it was just, they couldn't get it out of the cage. And so anyway, so that's fine. And anyway, my sister didn't know what to do. Now, my sister has a 4-year degree. My mother came downstairs. We're frozen. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I
Hear you.
can, yeah.
And so anyway, and my mother came down. Now, my mother's an RN. They have all this education and all of them are looking at this dog and they have no idea how to get the dog out of the cage. Anyway, so they had the cage door open. The intellectually disabled young woman reached down, got a broom, put it against the dog's butt, and popped it out of the cage.
And then the dog was not aggressive anymore, probably.
No, because it was out of the cage. So,
Yes.
but I got a kick out of it because she might have been intellectually disabled, but she wasn't stupid.
Yeah, good one. Thanks,
Yeah.
Kathy. Yeah.
Okay.
Marcel, you have another? Or not?
Well, I probably have a million stories, but
Okay.
to think of one right off, I didn't make a list of little stories I can tell. I have to, it's up, you gotta take one, Gordon.
Okay, well, how about a small drinking story? Not that I drink, but I used to hang around with some people, and Tommy Basker was a
Yes.
very interesting character, and he played the harmonica and the piano, and I don't know what else. He had a CD out called The Tin Sandwich. Anyways, he liked coming around our area here because it was Otis and Paul Cranford and Paul McDonald, and they're all really great musicians. So he would come and play, and there would be drinks and that sort of thing. So at this time, Paul Cranford was living in the little cabin by the banana farm. So everybody was at that little cabin by the banana farm. And Tommy was there, and being a responsible citizen, after drinking a good part of the evening, they just sleep there, so you're not on the road. So the next morning, you're sitting around, everybody's you hear this, it's like, what's that? And Tommy yells out, that's an eye opener. Oh, okay. 5 minutes later, what's that? That's the other eye. And he had about 10,000 jokes, but there was maybe 2 or 3 you could tell, in a civilized place. The rest of them were pretty much Waterford jokes. But he was a great guy. Tommy Basker was a great guy. And he used to come around, and he always brightened the day.
Lovely.
Okay, Marcel, pick it up.
Okay, well, I just thought this is not it's not a story that happened here. It happened when I was probably 15 in the prairies, and I lived in a 1-cow town, and I had a horse, and my best friend, who was the doctor, we had the store, and my best friend was the doctor in the town, and they had horses, and my friend Marina and I used to ride daily, and we used to ride all the time. And so we were out in the fields behind the sports ground, we were in the sports ground and beyond, but there was a little hotel, and every town in that part of the prairie, every 7 miles, has a hotel which has 4 bedrooms and a dining room to justify having the tavern part. And so we were riding out there. It's in the afternoon, and we're coming back towards town, and we're at a full gallop. We always rode bareback, and we're going to cut across behind the hotel into the into the body of the town, which was a very small town. And as I'm coming at a full gallop into the yard of the family who had the hotel, because they lived in the back of the hotel, of the motel, it was a motel, you'd call it. And so I'm coming in at a full gallop, and there's a clothesline. And I think, oh. And I thought, oh, well, that's okay, I'll just duck. And so my horse wasn't a really high horse. And so anyway, as we come in, I got that clothesline in my view, and we're coming in, and we're coming really fast. And so I get way down and I put my head down. We did a lot of this kind of stuff, but go right down by the neck of the horse and we're going at a full gallop. And then I thought, okay, I guess we're done. And I sit up. As I sat up, like it all was one motion. I sat up and I got the clothesline right across the bridge.
Oy, oy.
Is that the bridge where, you know, where your eyes are? And I came up and I went back and went off the back of the horse, landed on the ground, and my horse just kind of stops. And my friend Marina, she comes up behind me and she's laughing her head off. And I'm laying on the ground and I can see red because I got kind of blood in my eyes and stuff. And here she is laughing and laughing and hoping I'm not dead. And her dad is the doctor, of course, so I wasn't impressed that she was laughing so much, but I did a kind of a mental check and I could tell nothing was broken in my body except my face felt really weird. So I climbed, you have to jump back on the horse because you don't have a saddle. So you have to kind of, anyway, do the big leap and then the leg swing and have to ride to her place. And the whole time I'm kind of like stunned and she's laughing and she's trying to make conversation and I'm kind of groaning and doing my stuff. So we get to the house and they had the clinic connected to their house because that's how they did it. And so I go in and Dr. Lammers gets me in and so he's sewing up. I have got to get my nose stitched up and he couldn't stitch up my eyelids and stuff, but I end up like for weeks, my face was swollen and black eyes and stitches. And people asked you what happened. Every time I'd have to go through this totally unlikely story. And I just think, if I had sat up and the horse was a little higher, I could be dead if I'd gotten it across the throat. Yeah. Anyway, that was that was a really interesting experience. And
is that why you left the prairies?
no, I had a few more of those kinds of things happen. I had a lot of we had a lot of really funny horse stories in that, but I think somebody else should take a story turn.
Okay, I saw that Art Spencer had a question. He said, banana farm? What's the banana farm? And I see Judy Brown is on here and she was custodian there for a while. Judy, do you want to answer that question? Can we get you on here? I'm springing this on you because that's what I like to do.
She'll just have to open her video if she's interested, I think.
Yeah. Well, if she doesn't, there are others who know.
So the people who bought, how that became the banana farm. So between 74 and 76, Mike Crimp and I had a sign shop where the restaurant is, the Lobster Galley. And we sold cedar signs. Actually, where Gordon has his shop, these folks had bought the business from us. And the shop used to be the new sign shop. So, I think I forgot what my story was.
Banana farm.
All right.
Yes.
So thank you, Gordon. So we're running our shop and there's two cyclists come up to the shop in the afternoon and we talk and they stayed for a long time and we talked. So it happened to be Bernie Bernd-Walter, Bernie and Leah Bernstock, maybe. Anyway, they were on their bikes and they were scouting a ride that was going to be coming around the Cabot Trail on bicycles, and they had stopped and we were visiting. So we asked them to come. They may as well pedal as far as Tarbet, across from, well, that's where Dan Hector Smith and them and Tarbet were, and said, come on up and set up your tents there and camp there for the night. That's another so many miles. And they did come and spent the night. And in the next morning with breakfast, we told them about the house that is now, well, that became the banana farm, was John Huey somebody, and he had a store there. And so he had passed away, and his wife was selling the farm or the place. And oh, we would have loved to buy that place. So we showed it to Bernie and Leah, and we went up in the morning and looked at it. And then they ended up buying it. But they bought it with several other young people who bought it together. They all invested, and they had all invested in a place in Ontario. They were from Ontario. They worked out of Toronto, but they were young professionals like lawyers and not professionals, but all people. Tim Burkhart was, sorry, Tim, but Tim Burkhart was part of the gang. And they had purchased a place in Ontario. And then this place, because of this interaction, they ended up investing. But when they were on this farm in Ontario, all these supposed professional intellectual types, and the friends would come from Toronto, and I guess they nicknamed it the banana farm because, well, you know, it could be they did the occasional toke and stuff like that. So people would go there for the weekends, and they called it the banana farm. And so when they invested together and bought this property on the North Shore at Little River, they kind of called it Banana Farm East. And there were different people who lived. Did they come there at first? Yes, they maybe did come. They all moved there together. So it was quite a gang of people living there, and really hilarious and fun people, and interesting, and there were a lot of fun stories. And so it was called the Banana Farm for a long time, and that's how you referred to it. But it was John Huey's, and I don't remember his last name. And then Bill Nicholson bought the place when they all sold. They, you know, everybody was kind of going their way, separate ways, and Bill did not like the name Banana Farm. But before Bill actually moved there, I think different people lived there. When Gordon Kennedy first came to Cape Breton Island, he and his wife Carol, who were they were pregnant, and I think, is that right, Gordon? And you came and you rented there for some years. And then different people lived. But Bill Nicholson owned it at that time, and Laura Smith lived there for a period as well. But Bill really took offense to it being referred to as Banana Farm. So now, after Bill passed away, it went back to Banana Farm. Like right.
It never left.
I know.
It never left. When we moved in there, I had no idea where this place was. It was another thing on the side of the road. We were moving from Toronto, so it could have been Meat Cove, could have been any place. But it was there, and I was trying to explain to the oil guy where this place was, how far from the ferry, all this stuff. And finally, you know, we weren't getting anywhere. And they said, well, you know, some people call it the banana. Oh, you're at the Banana Farm. I know right where you were at. So they were pretty famous for all kinds of things. And it was a great place. Yeah, both my kids were born in the basement, though. It's terrible, man. Like, I moved there. I thought I'd be the good soldier. You know, I cut a pile of wood. I put it all in the basement so I'd light the furnace and everything in the winter. And the first time it rained, I went down, it was all floating around. It had 18 inches of water. And I was wondering why all these pallets were on the basement floor. I thought, oh, well, you know, they must be storing stuff. So you walk on the pallets and the water would stop an inch below your fishing boots. And it was like, oh, it was cold. Like it was a cold old place. Bill fixed it up. But yeah, no, he did not like the banana farm. He wanted it to be the Nicholson's place, which, anyways, it was a great old farm, beautiful walk to the water, all kinds of stuff. Both my kids were born when we were living there. We had a lot of fun there. But the winters, you could keep it warm until the wind blew, and then it was over. It just went right through the place. And you just sort of, you could cook an egg. It had one of those little coal burning things with the center. The heat came up the center and the cold returned down the side. And you could be cooking on the center 5 feet away. It was just cold. But it was, it was a good spot to be. It was very pretty, had wainscoting and all that. And when Bill came, he put in new windows, fixed it up. I'm sure it was much more civilized, but it went through a lot of phases. And those banana farmers were a pretty wild bunch. They were actually semi-professionals. They were trained professionally, but they weren't really doing much. It was kind of the hippie days, so it was more like a sort of as I gather, I wasn't there then, but I gather it's kind of like a little bit of a drop-in commune kind of thing. And a lot of good times were had, I'm sure.
It was a really fun place to go and sit around and laugh. I'm telling you, we laughed. There was a lot of laughing happened in that house.
Yeah, I believe that.
Marcel, Barb Longworth, it was John Huey Matson was the name you were looking for. Right?
Matheson, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
John Huey Matheson, yeah. And Russell McInnes would tell me stories at the store about being in the store. He'd go with his dad and the old guys would be sitting around the stove and he'd be sitting there listening to their stories. Oh, he loved that. But that was neat because anyway, Russell would talk about that.
That
Gordon,
store
you're
lived on.
floating.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say the store lived on. They had the hair of the dog cafe there. It was I forget what night of the week it was. It didn't really matter. But as you know, this place is full of musicians. They were all you lift everybody, whatever they do, I'm sure they play the fiddle or something as well. And so there was a lot of musical parties there. And it was the Hair of the Dog Cafe, and I forget who. There was a beautiful sign painted, everything. Kind of fell apart. I forget what happened. Something untoward, I guess. But it was
because of the parking, Gordon.
That's yeah. Well, it was always a little dicey. It was right on that stupid corner.
Yeah,
I do remember that.
Yeah, and all the kids. We took all our kids to those, so there was a lot of little children, and everybody was there, and there was a lot of square dancing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a dangerous spot to park. I parked there in the winter to instead of being in the banana farm driveway, which was slightly uphill, and in my old Rex, it would never work. But I had this one. I bought it off a single mom at Twilight, and I didn't even argue the price. It was, and I really should have known better. Anyways, it was a Datsun station wagon or something, but I had it parked in there, and everybody wanted to go to town. I didn't want to go to town. Didn't feel like it. It was winter and there was snow all over the place. But no, okay, we're going to go. Well, it wouldn't move out of the driveway. So I went to the back and I put my feet against the snow bank and my back against the back of with a hatchback. And I pushed. I went right through the goddamn thing. Landed in the back seat. And that's when Carol said, well, I guess we're not going to town after all. It's like, no, we're not. It was a beautiful spot, the banana. And if you left your car there during decent weather, quite often there would be suspicious, a 5-gallon jerry cans worth of gas would be missing quite regularly, but it could have been anyone.
I don't know, Gordon.
Yeah, well, I do know. Because it was Finley. I was talking to Finley and I said, it's kind of funny. It just seemed to be the exact amount. And Finley said, yeah, that's funny. All right. He knew exactly what was going on. It was probably my neighbors. But it didn't matter. It was their turn. I know my friends used to, it's just one of those things. But it's annoying if you don't have enough gas to get to where you're going.
No,
Gordon, you talked about your floating firewood in the basement. I had some things to learn when I moved here. It was the first time I'd heated only with wood, the first winter here, and so we went to Lowe's on custom wood, and I needed a place to put it, so I thought I'll put it under the overhang of the roof at the back here, and it was a good idea because the rain wouldn't fall straight down on it. It occurred to me only later that snow on the roof does melt and drip off, and it dripped right into the wood pile. So from about February on, when I wanted wood to burn, I had to chop it out of the ice with a hatchet and bring it in to dry for 2 days before I could put it in the stove.
oh God.
I've learned some since then.
Yeah,
Marcel,
well, I did the same thing, Bill. The one year I bought the 8-foot logs here and I started cutting it up and I thought, it's kind of good exercise. I'll spread it out over the winter. I'll just do some every week and split it. I was splitting it by hand. I thought this would be great. Yeah, well, then the winter came here and it rained and froze and Jesus, it took all day to dig a log out of the ice and then cut it up. And as you say, about 2 weeks later when you could actually get it to burn. Yeah, you learn fast. I built a woodshed the very next summer. It was a life lesson.
Yeah. Marcel, you got a note from Barb Long that says you should tell a story of the tea bag.
Oh,
see that?
Barb. Well,
You don't
that
have
is,
to. It's a suggestion.
it's kind of, it could be a little bit off color, but it's a hilarious story that happened in my store that, oh my goodness. And so yes, I will tell. Thank you, Barb.
Thanks a lot,
So-
Barb.
We're in the store, like you're in the you're behind this counter, and when you have a store in the middle of nowhere, and like people come in, and you never know who it is. Like in the summer season, you never know who's coming in. You just are sitting there, and you have to be totally neutral and not have anticipation of sort of what's going to happen in the next 10 minutes of your day. So this group, a small group of people, moseys into the store and hello, and they kind of drift off. And the nature of the place was that people would find the music, and someone would find the books, and someone would get into the candy section and whatever. One of the people in the group came and ordered a cup of tea. And at that time, there was a counter right across with chairs, and I served all the tea and made all the coffee. It wasn't self-serve. And so off he goes while I'm getting everything ready, and I've got the tea bag in the cup, and it's sitting on the counter, but he's kind of forgotten that he's ordered tea. And the tea is in the water, and it's like probably getting stronger. Like, oh no, does he like his tea like mild, or like so I'm starting to get concerned about his experience of his drinking his tea, if it's going to be cold and too strong. And I've just got this in my mind, and they're just doing their stuff. And so I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe I should just squeeze the bag and take it out. And I thought, well, maybe I could just, excuse me, sir. Then I think, oh my God, I can't say that. I say like, should I squeeze your bag? And like, I didn't say anything, but I would go to say something and I say, well, I can't say that. And then I think, well, do you like your bag squeezed? Oh no, I can't say that. And then the tea was getting stronger, and like I'm starting to get red in the face because I'm getting so embarrassed. And I thought, how come I can't think of how to ask him, what do I do with your tea? But anyway, by the time he came, like it was the water was probably cold and the tea was way too strong. I was sitting there like purple in the face from embarrassment. And I just couldn't even say anything about it. But the whole thing just sort of happened in my head. And for the rest of the day, I just was kind of like stunned, thinking, oh my goodness, that is so weird. So in the next morning, I open the store at whatever ridiculously early time, and I've got everything going. And this person, a fellow, walks in again that I don't know. He's from a ways by himself. It's really early, and he's coming right across to get a coffee. And I'm still processing this hilarious situation that happened. So I just start telling him the story. And I realize the guy is getting red and he's getting really embarrassed. Oh my God, this is getting even worse. And then I don't know how I stopped it, but I thought, okay, let the story go, let it sit. Don't even go there anymore. It's just like, but that's the story of the tea bag. I think, Barb, that's the one you meant.
Oh yes, she sent you an LOL. So that's the one, all right. Yeah. Is there anyone else with a tail out there hanging by?
Barb needs to tell a story from the wharf. Barb, about when you were working on that program with Angus and the milk and the drinking your tea. If that's too gross.
It sounds like a challenge.
Yeah, it's a gross one. You just don't have. But your turn, Barb.
Dum 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 dum. Is she gonna bite?
She's not gonna bite. Ah, you coward.
Good, we're name calling now. Right on.
Yeah.
The Jerry Springer Story Hour.
I can.
So
The stories.
Well, the tourist thing, like, as you know, I got the roadside attraction there in downtown Tarbert, and you do get some strange people. And my shop, of course, set up backwards, so the workshop's in the front and the gallery's in the back, so half the people never really figured that out. But this was a nice morning, and I'm sitting there, and I can't remember what I was doing, but this car pulls up close to the doors, and he winds down his window, and it's like, yeah, and he starts yelling, like, what's this big deal about the Cabot Trail? What's it, and I'm thinking, well, first of all, what's it got to do with me? Like, why are you talking to me? And I have a hammer in my hand too, so people usually are nice. So anyways, he's ranting and raving about this bloody Cabot Trail. I said, well, what's the problem? And he said, well, I just did it twice in the last hour. And you'll understand this, Bill. So I was looking at him, and all kinds of things were running through. It was just so easy. I couldn't actually say anything to the guy because there's a blinking light on the corner. And if you go through Tarbert, if you turn right, you take the ferry, and you get the highway, and you go back down to the Lobster Gallery, and you go around. And he'd done this loop twice. So I figured that out, and I was looking at him, and I figured, okay, it's too easy. So I said, listen, you go down here, when you get to the corner, turn left and see what happens. And I left it, but I always wondered how he felt when he got to Smokey, because he was being quite cross. I don't know where he came from, but it's like, yeah, okay, man. There's nothing to it. You can do it all in 15 minutes if you hurry. But it's funny, but people are odd, it's true.
Yes. Well, the Cabot Trail is 301 kilometers around, and he did 35 twice in the same loop. So, yeah.
You can see how it happened.
Pretty good tourist stories.
Oh, yeah. No, I met lots of people that got as far as the Newfoundland Ferry. They just missed the turnoff, and they stayed on the road. So I wonder if some just went to Newfoundland rather than admit they were that stupid.
Yes.
So I have a story of that involved a little girl who lived next door and travelers on motorcycles, if you're interested. So this was hot summer day, really hot blue sky day, and really busy in the middle of summer where bikes and lots and lots and lots of people at the store all the time. So Lynn, who worked for me for all the years that I was open there, it was her day off, and she had her granddaughter with her and her little grandson, who are now young with, she's a young woman with her own children today. And she was the cutest little thing. And she had big, long, black pigtails that just kind of came out the side of her head. And she was a beautiful little girl. And they were sitting on a picnic table to the left of the door in front of the store. And they were all sitting and licking an ice cream cone. And coming into the gas pumps is all a huge gang of motorcycles, but the Quebec, like they look like the Hells Angels style, you know, but they're just rough, just like rough, almost intimidating people. And they often would, you know, some of them would be very angry and, you know, saying, well, what is so big deal about the Cabot Trail, you know? And anyway, but they were just very intimidating looking people. And there were a lot of them, and they surrounded the pumps, and they were, you know, the bikes were revving, and they were doing all this stuff. So there was, you know, a lot of other people, and I have to be amongst it, getting gas and paying gas. And I look like Mary Poppins with my long dress. All these, and so anyway, and a lot of tourists in the yard, and there was a little bit of energy going on. And one of these, so this little girl, her dad had a motorcycle, and he was a north from Niels Harbor, handsome man, but tough looking. And so she was used to that look, and he was, you know, he just looked like these guys. And so to her it was totally normal. Like, he had a big bike, and it was her dad. So like, she was just this little girl eating her ice cream cone, and all this action going on. And this big guy, and he looks like anyway, he was coming to the store, I guess, to pay. He was finished, and like walking with his arms out, you know. It's like, they're so big and almost fat, and a big beard. And she's looking at this guy coming across, and lots of people all around. And as he's about halfway between the pumps and the door of the store towards where she's sitting, and her pigtails going and her legs kicking in front, you know, underneath, and licking her ice cream cone. And she looks up and she says, "Hey, mister, I really like your bikes." She just yelled this, and it was the sweetest and most beautiful thing. And like, the whole friggin' parking lot erupted in joy and relief, you know. And the guy had this big smile, and she was so happy and totally oblivious. It was such a beautiful scene, you know. And anyway, I don't even know if she remembers that. And her dad passed away.
She'll be in the archives now, Marcel.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for that one. Barb has taken the bait, and she is going to tell her story. Just before we do that, I want to give Gordon a commercial here. If you're looking to find out about Gordon's sculpture and artwork, you go to ironart.ca. And on that site, there is a link to a wonderful, wonderful documentary called Rust, about Gordon and his work and St. Anne's Bay, and it's a lovely piece of work and terrific to watch. So, Councillor Longba, are you ready to jump into the deep end here, my dear? Barbara's our guest last month. There she is.
Yeah, that brings back so many memories. That story that Marcel brought up, because at that time, it is like 27 years ago, and I was pregnant.
I need to interrupt. Yeah. You need to say this is not for the faint of heart.
It's not for the faint of heart.
For the faint of heart.
Or the weak of stomach.
Or the weak of stomach.
Yeah, so it brings back so many memories, because it was when I was pregnant with my daughter, and she's like 27. now. And and I was working on a grant. It was before I started my So Inclined business, and I was working on a grant trying to get enough stamps for unemployment, and didn't get enough at that grant. So afterwards, I went to work for Mary McGinnis, which was Meryl's mother, and she was like the sweetest lady for Mary and Johnny. And this was like very near just before Mary died, actually. I had gone to work for them, but before that, I was working on the grant, and we were working on building wharves at Little River Wharf. We were building like floatable wharfs, and we were waiting for materials to come, most of the grant. So we were sitting in a fish shed playing cards, and it was really cold in the fish shed most of the time. And some of the people, like Murdoch McDonald was our foreman, and Archie McDonald, Buddy's brother, was there, and he's not with us anymore. And Alan Kagan was the workhorse of the crew, and he's not with us anymore. And anyway, I'm not going to mention all the names of the people, but it was quite a crew that was there, and I was the only woman. And I was very pregnant, like about 8 months. And so this morning I come into work, and it's really cold in the fish shed that we're working in, and the coffee pot's all set up, and I go over and pour myself a coffee, and there's a little half liter of cream there, and I picked it up and shook it to see if there was anything in it, and it seemed like, yeah, there was enough for one more. So I poured it into my coffee, and it kind of just floated there. I thought it's frozen. So I stirred it, and nothing happened to it, but I thought it was still frozen because it was cold in there. So I took a sip of it, and but it just kept floating, and it wasn't like mixing in with the coffee. So I was like, oh, this is gross. I said, it looks like somebody spit in it. And then one of my coworkers goes, I did spit in it. And I was like, oh, well, needless to say, I threw my coffee away, and I didn't drink anything the rest of the day. And for about 3 years, I gagged when I told the story. But after 27 years, I can tell it without gagging anymore. Thanks, Marcel.
Yeah. I just, for your reputation,
This is great. I don't mind being a ringmaster here. Just watching the stories go by. It's lovely.
Where's Clay Carmichael? We need Clay Carmichael to tell a couple of stories.
Okay, I'll tell him you recommended him when I come knocking on his door.
Yeah, him and Alan McInnes.
I have a story that I heard from Alan McGinnis. You mentioned going other places to work, and a lot of people from here went to what they called the Boston States. Now it's out west, but they used to go to Boston, what they called the Boston States, and the men would look for whatever work they had, and women would be domestic help. There was this one guy and everybody that went away swore they'd come back, and some of them did, but some did not. This one fella had left when he was just 20 or so. He went to Boston, and it was good 25 years later he came back to visit, and he was full of himself. He was out on the boat with his two uncles, saying, oh, I got a lovely house in Boston and a great wife and wonderful kids, and I make lots of money, and it's just the best place in the world to live. And the uncles are getting kind of fed up with this. And one of them says, now, Danny, when you were here before, he says, you had a good bit of the Gaelic. Do you still have the Gaelic? Oh, no, he says, I don't, there's no call for it there. We don't use it anymore. He said, I can understand it, but I can't speak it. Ah, says the uncle, I have a dog that can do that.
Good one.
Thanks, Alan. I remember the first conversation I had with Gordon Kennedy. I live, we're exactly 1 kilometer from the commercial heart of downtown Target, which is Gord's shop. I went down to introduce myself, and he just, the way he does, stopped what he was doing, and we sat and talked for probably an hour or so in the in the photo gallery, which is behind the shop, and talking about how life is here is people here do what they have to do to get by, and employment is different and money is different, and you just kind of feel the pulse of the place and go with that. You're going to be all right. And I have, and I do, and I feel pretty good here. I like it here.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things, when I first was here, it was, I guess Lloyd McGinnis still owned the Esso there, and Finley Buchanan and Gerald McLennan were there running the place, working. And, I guess then Finley may have been 50-ish, and you couldn't find a nicer guy than Finley. But, where I grew up, if you were working in a gas station, then, some might consider that you didn't do so well. But the thing here that I noticed, like when Finley had a wedding anniversary, like they had to have it in the fire hall. And everybody came from down north to all over the place because he was, he was a really nice guy, and everybody got to know him. He could get your parts for your chainsaws and make sure you had gas in your car, remind you to check the oil if you're going to Sydney, because that's a long drive. It could blow up, all that kind of stuff. But I realized then that, that you sort of do what you got to do here. So for the most part, people kind of try to judge you for who you actually are, not what you do, because you do whatever the hell you have to do to survive. But that may not be who you actually are. And I thought that was interesting. And that was, part of the reason that I didn't leave right away, because it was a pretty rough winter the first year I was here. I gotta tell you, that froze to death in the banana farm. There was about 6 feet of snow minimum. I had a shovel. It's like, Jesus. And and everything was so bleak. It's like I went to the beach. I kicked over a rock, thought there'd be little crabs. Nothing. It's like the ocean comes in, grinds those rocks together, and it makes sand. I guess that's about it. But there's you don't cut it here. Like it's you got to be tough. And but people accept that, or they seem to. Anyways, that was my take on it. And Finley was a great guy. There was no doubt about it. And he would, he would make things go smoothly for you. They would put stuff behind the station, fix tires, leave it. You didn't have to keep the hours. And Gerald's still going. He's still going. And, it's a nice place. Yeah. But you've done well, Bill, and you managed to write a book here and hang out, and you're still here. So
3 books, yeah. A short stint in the petroleum industry. I'll talk about that later. There was someone asked Gordon, how did you get here? What brought you to Cape Breton?
Well, like I said, I was originally from the West Coast, and I went to Vancouver Art School out there. It's morphed into Emily Carr College of Art. Anyways, I finished school there, and I did my European trip to look at all these art galleries and things that I had been thinking about. And I got back to Vancouver, and I set up a little studio and started painting. And then I just kind of got tired of it all. I'd been there, and it was a really beautiful, stunningly beautiful, but there wasn't too much happening in the art scene there. Certainly not for me, which probably wasn't that unusual. But anyways, so I decided to go to Toronto and just for the heck of it and see what was going on there. So I did. I moved cold turkey to Toronto and wound up living in a warehouse, sort of underground. It was kind of fun, and but I got a lot of work done. I was having a great time, and that's where I met my first wife, Carol, and she was starting off in photography there. And she was really, that's the first thing I noticed, that she's really had a lot of talent, because there's a lot of people get into photography because it appears to be easy, but a lot of them don't necessarily have the talent. And she did. I could see that in her work. It was really, really great. So anyways, we got together, and then she got pregnant. So we decided to find a place outside of town. And because you can't have a baby in a warehouse. I suppose you could, but you're not supposed to be there at all yourself. So we started looking around, and there was no like, I didn't make any money, so that was pretty much straightforward. So we were looking for a break in rents and everything. So we're looking all around the outside of Toronto, and there's about $50 less to live there with no chance of catching casual employment. So Carol went to some garden party with those people that Marcel was talking about that were in the banana farm. I guess we'd call it west from here. And they suggested that maybe she get in touch with Bill Nicholson, because they said the old banana farm's for rent. And she said, well, she asked me, but figured I might want to go west. And so she came back and said, hey, there's this place and just by the water. So I said, oh, well, okay. So we bought this pickup truck. Big mistake. I knew it was too good a deal. Anyways, we drove that thing out here, and it was a Datsun pickup truck. It was like the Grapes of Wrath. We took everything, darkroom sinks, all this stuff, packed it in the back and tarped it over, and drove nonstop because there was something wrong with the fuel pump and the carburetor. It wouldn't idle. It would go fine on the highway, but if you tried to go through any little city or something, it wouldn't do that. So we went to Bill Nicholson's place in the Laurentians to meet the landlord. And of course, he's got this beautiful log place and heating with wood. And I had never built a fire to stay warm other than a campfire until I moved to Cape Breton. So, somebody said, oh, would you adjust the fire there at Bill's place? And like, I sort of pushed a little stick or something, but it was embarrassing. But we just came out here, and I got here, and it was fall. It was beautiful. Like driving out was absolutely fantastic. I see, if the West Coast, you don't have these colors. And when we went through Quebec and everything, it was just it was like a bowl of Fruit Loops. The whole bloody thing was just fantastic color. And it was all the way to Cape Breton. It was beautiful. And then my first inclination when we pulled in the banana farm was like, don't unpack. So I looked at the place, and I didn't know much about construction, but I knew this place had been neglected. So I was thinking, maybe we should just not unpack. Maybe we should just keep going. But then we did unpack and started fooling around. And the first person I met was Merrill McGinnis. He came to see, just to see what, what, I guess he's a friend of Bill's, and Bill didn't tell anyone they're coming. So suddenly I'm there cutting up wood and, moving into this house. So that was a good meet with them. And it was, so we got here by pickup, but that's the story. And we came here to have baby, and that was very successful. We had two, and I never really left. I'm still on an adventure. I'm not Gareth, but I think, I don't see, you never know. But I'm thinking I'm here for the big picture.
Good. You mentioned service station, and that reminded me of something, and it also has a story about community. Stuart McRae founded the Esso station in Bedeque. When you say the Esso station in Bedeque, it's the only one. There are two other service stations. There's the what's her name, Irving, out on the highway, and the formerly the Peter McCauley's Ultramar, and that's where I spent my time in the petroleum industry. But Stuart, when he retired, he turned his station over to his son David, and Stuart had horses. He just had mares. He didn't have a stallion. So whenever one of his mares was in the mood to add a generation, he would pick up the phone and order sperm. Who knew you could pick up the phone and order sperm for a horse? I guess it makes sense, but he would do that. They'd ship it in, he'd go meet it at the airport, or he'd go pick it up at the bus at Peter McCauley's Ultramar there. And then he'd call the vet, and it wasn't romantic, but the job was done, and and he got his mare's bred. Anyway, one Friday, just before a long weekend, one of his mares was showing signs that she might like to do something. And so he thought, oops, bit of a time crunch here with a long weekend coming up. So he called the sperm place and they said, okay, we'll rush it out. It'll be on the last bus tonight. The bus came into Peter's Ultramar at 10 o'clock at night. And once the bus had left, then the station was closed until 7:30 the next morning. So then he phoned the vet and said, this is the situation. Said, geez, well, it's a long weekend. I'm going away. I'll tell you what, I can do it tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, but that's the only time because I won't be back till Tuesday. Stuart said, fine, that's good. The sperm's on the way. The vet's going to come first thing in the morning. He had his dinner and sat down, watched TV to wait for the last bus at 10 o'clock. And when he woke up at a quarter after 11, he realized he had a situation on his hands because the mare was still in heat. The sperm was in the fridge of Peter McCauley's Ultramar, which was closed, and the vet only had that one window at a time. So he did something that you can do in a small community and maybe have more trouble with than the large one. At 5:30 in the morning, he phoned Peter McCauley at home and said, Peter, I need to get to the station for this sperm. So Peter got up and met him down at the Ultramar at 6:30. They handed over the sperm and he drove back home to Middle River just as the vet was pulling into the driveway, and that's the story. I don't know if they had a full or what they call it, maybe close call or something. Anyway, that's Stuart.
Yeah.
Life begins at the end of your comfort zone. Art Spencer said that. Have you found the end yet, Art? Yeah. Is there anyone else ready to jump in? Our friend from Toronto had said she had another story and might tell it sometime. This, by the way, is the last New Moon Stories for this round. We will pick it up again probably in the fall, depending on how the plague treats us and who's sitting in this chair and if the gods are willing and there are more stories to tell. Catherine, I've thrown the glove down to you, Ms. Murray.
Oh, here, I'll unmute.
I think maybe another time. I'm having a little issue with the new puppy right now. That's why I'm blocked off because we're having a little doggy issue.
Okay. Okay, good enough. I see Marianne Wilson on there too, and Marianne's got a lot of stories. Woohoo.
And Barb mentioned something there. Did she say she had one?
Yes, I have a short one.
Okay, bring it on.
Yeah, so this is it's actually the same character that spit in the jug, who I'm not going to mention any names. But he was a very thin man, and he still is. And so over the years, like a lot of families in this area, including myself, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, and because he never gained any weight, he never got new pants, he just never outgrew them. They just got shorter and shorter. So sometimes he used to get teased about like having high water pants or flood pants. And then one day he got this brand new jacket, and it was like a leather jacket. It was like really nice, and he loved it. It was like so nice. And he wore it to school, and he was getting off the bus, and someone says, "Hey, what is there going to be a flood?" And then he goes, "Don't be ridiculous. This is not a rain jacket."
Good one. I'm reminded of one Bucky told me about Alex McLean, who worked on the ferry for years and years at Englishtown, going back and forth, and he would always interact with the tourists. And this car of people came along, and they're on the boat, and Alex said, "Well, how did you like the Cabot Trail?" "Oh, it's lovely," he said. "Beautiful place." The four kids in the car. He said, "But what do you do for excitement around here?" And Alex said, "We don't get too excited around here." We
Yeah.
filled in our time. Tara, do you have anything else to add here in Madeira?
No, just a big thank you, Bill. Thanks to our storytellers this evening and all New Moon Stories 1 to 9. There's too many to name. I'd forget people for sure. But it's been a really wonderful series, and Bill is the driver behind this series, and I want to thank him for keeping it going, for editing the videos, for finding people, because it's not always easy to find someone who's going to share a story, but then especially on Zoom, we were saying it's even harder to get comfortable around that. So just a big thank you, Bill. It's been wonderful, and I hope we can do it again. We'll keep everyone posted.
And thank you to one and all for coming this
I-
time and other times. And as you know, these are archived. If you go to cbrl.ca/New Moon Stories, there we are. And if you missed any punchlines, Art and Kathy, you can find them there. I will get the raw video tomorrow and try and get it on in a few days. Gordon, what have you got? You look like you have another story.
What? Oh, you caught me napping there. What was the
Right.
what was the question?
You got anything else to add here, my man?
Oh, sure. How much time you got? I thought we just quit.
We got
Okay,
all
I'll
night.
tell you
Nope.
one little story. It's a very gentle story, right? So I'm in the gallery one day and in the morning, and a hummingbird flies in because I don't have the screen door. And they fly in quite a bit because there was flowers around there. And anybody, you try to catch a hummingbird. The thing is, you don't want to hurt the hummingbird. You got to be careful. You got to do all this. So this hummingbird's in and it's by the window and I'm thinking, yeah. And I hear someone's walking up. Someone has stopped. So they're walking up. They're going to come into the gallery. And I thought, okay. So I said, fine. I walked up to the hummingbird and I put my finger right by it and I willed that damn bird to climb on my finger. And it did. I just about fainted. It got on my finger and I took it around the door. And at this point, the woman had come up the walk and she could see me. And I took the hummingbird and I went out and I just let it go. And she says to me, "Oh, you must know that bird." Like, oh yeah, we're old friends. We had dinner last night. Jesus. But it was nice, and it never happened since. But it was it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Anyways, good night. Thank you. It was wonderful.
Good
Good
night.
night.
all.
Thank
night,
you very
all.
much. Thanks,
See ya.
Marcel.
Thank
Night.
you. Good night.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.